Hey everybody. We moved into the parsonage about 12 and a half years ago, and I'll never forget the first night that we spent. I didn't get much sleep. You say, why didn't you get much sleep? Just before we went to bed, I'd say 10 or 11 o'clock, we came into a realization that sleeping in the parsonage might be difficult. About 10, 11 o'clock, we hear outside what felt like the front door, we hear this. There's a train track that is just north of the parsonage. And 4 to 5 times a day, there is a train that runs straight down that track. And it felt like that it was literally like coming into the house. And I remember 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning, when that train came through and that honk happened, dude, I was wide awake. Well, fast forward 12 and a half years later, man, you know what? I don't even hear that train anymore. As a matter of fact, I had a friend over last week and the train went off and he was like, man, does that train bother you? And I said, man, to be honest, we don't even hear it anymore. We've got so accustomed to the train going off, like we don't even notice it. I bring that up to kind of illustrate a point. What would happen if we were so asleep that on the day of the Lord's coming, he blew the trumpet and we didn't hear it? We were so asleep, hear this, that when he blew the trumpet, we slept right through it. That is the word of caution that, or at least the point that Jesus is trying to make with his disciples as we closed out Mark 13 on Sunday. As a matter of fact, I actually pulled it and wanted to just kind of, for thoroughness, revisit it. He says, be on guard. He says, keep awake. And then 3 times, stay awake, stay awake, stay awake. So what I wanted to do with our time together, and I'm going to try to be brief as I can, I came across an article from the Gospel Coalition that I want to kind of illustrate what it looks like to be spiritually asleep versus being spiritually awake. The writer writes this: being asleep means living life as though God didn't exist. Waking up means realizing there's a God to whom you'll give an account for your life. So he's going to contrast these two things. Being spiritually asleep is to live your everyday rhythms of life as if God doesn't exist at all. Okay, it's going through the routines of your day without any sort of acknowledgement of the fact that God is alive and that God is aware of of the things that you're doing or going about. Conversely, being spiritually alert is to recognize that you're living a life that at one day you're going to stand before God and give an account. So your life is not your own, or to say it another way, you want to live a life that is God honoring. And so whether that's in your relationships at home, whether relationships at work, relationships where you play, party, enjoy recreation, all of that, that one day you're given an account for the entirety of your life. Those that are spiritually awake know that. Those that are spiritually asleep don't consider that at all. They live according to whatever way they want to live. Let me move rapidly. Being asleep means spending your time and your money as though this age were all there is. In converse, waking up means realizing this life is a vapor. Eternity is infinitely more important, and real life has barely begun. So it's this idea. Live for the pleasures of today because this is all there is. Versus, don't live just for the pleasures of the day. Live for the pleasures of eternity. That this is not all there is. And so it's this idea of our lives getting so consumed with worldly concerns that we dismiss things of eternal value. I hate to grab this illustration because I'm afraid we take it places that it's not meant to be. But it is this idea that you and the concerns of this world can captivate your calendar, while the things of eternal weight can be put on the back burner. It's things like spiritual disciplines and meeting and fellowshipping with other believers and serving the least among us get put on the back burner for the pleasures of this world. And again, spiritually asleep, living for the pleasures of this world. Spiritually awake, knowing that there's an eternity coming. And so you dismiss some of the pleasures of the world for eternal weight. Let me keep moving a little bit quicker. Being asleep means viewing yourself as the center of the universe. Waking up means counting God and neighbor more significantly than yourself. And this is pretty self-explanatory. It's living your life on a routine basis that, you know what, I'm just going to do what I feel. I want to do the things that bring me pleasure. It's about me, 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 me. And I want you to understand, you're living in a culture of social media where, man, this is being fed to you on routine. Every time they say, like, there's 17, I think on average, the people from the ages of like 30 to 56, 17 times a day you get on social media. This is not a kid's problem. This is a humanity problem. We get on social media 17 times a day, and social media is just feeding you. This life's about you. This life's about you. I mean, goodness gracious, they call it a selfie. A selfie. A selfie. It's about you. It's about your expression. If you don't like the way you look, filter it so you can put an image out there, right? And so it's this idea that you're living according to what you want and your desires versus living for the love of God and serving of others. So to be spiritually asleep, you're living, according to your rhythms and according to what you desire, versus being spiritually awake as I live for a love for God and I express that love for God with serving others. Let's keep moving. Being asleep means assuming that God does exist. Being asleep means assuming that if God does exist, let me be clear, He's tolerant and will accept you as long as you are true to yourself and do your best. Conversely, waking up means realizing God is holier than you ever dreamed. You're worse than you ever imagined, and your best will never be good enough. Now that sounds kind of bleak, right? You say, Pastor, that don't sound loving at all. Of course God knows I'm doing my best, right? I mean, surely, He's tolerant. He's got to be tolerant, or else none of us are going to make it, right? So nobody should judge, right? So God's tolerant. He understands my sinful bent. So I'm doing the best I can. Come on, leave me alone. Like I don't need. So that would be spiritually asleep. And conversely, let me walk through these real quick. Being spiritually awake, God's holier. To be spiritually awake is that God is holier than we've ever dreamed. Okay, His holiness, right, is greater than we could ever dream, and we are more sinful than we could ever realize. And so the gap is unbelievably great, and there is nothing that we can do to fix it, right? You say, Pastor, how is that helpful? Well, think about it. It puts you smack dab in the position to receive the one who can do something about it. The gospel is not something that we hear one time, we say yes to, and then we walk away from. The gospel is something that we hear one time and it affects the rest of our lives. And so again, spiritually asleep, He's tolerant. My sin's not a big deal. I'm doing the best I can, and that should be good enough. Versus spiritually awake, God's holier than I can ever imagine. I'm more sinful than I realize, and there's nothing I can do to fix it. And so it puts me in the posture of being at the feet of Jesus. Last thing, being asleep means the day of the Lord will be a surprise to you like a thief. Conversely, waking up means the day of the Lord will be more like a surprise party you knew was coming, but weren't sure exactly when it was going to happen. I love that. I want you to know, for all of you who are walking spiritually asleep, when the Lord comes back, it's going to be like a thief. You're going to wake up and think, what has happened? For the believer, or let me rephrase it, for the one spiritually awake, it's going to be more like a party that's being thrown. You walk in the room, all lights are off. You don't think any big deal about it. You go to flip the light on, all of a sudden you hear, surprise, and you turn around. There's all the people that you love the most. They've got gifts on the table. There's a big cake, got your name on it. And they're there to celebrate you. Surprise party. That's what the second coming of the Lord will be like. So remember, Be alert. Make sure you're awake. Stay awake, stay awake, stay awake. And those were the instructions left for the disciples. And so left you plenty to talk about. God bless you. And I'll see you on Sunday.